Thank you very much, Elad. Thanks, Stefan, to host us here in this place. Welcome of all of you. We are going to continue exactly the same in the same point that we stopped yesterday. If you remember, we start to survey, to scan three texts that related to the Pilpul, but we didn't. We discuss Pilpul itself only marginally. The most important thing was the organization of the Pilpul, the place of the ritual, in that to understand the yeshiva, to understand the changing of the program, the seder yom, the content of the yeshiva, etc., etc. Yesterday we start with Kapsali, text from the early 15th century. But till now, it's the most important text to understand the yeshiva, the relation between the Pilpul, the Spanish originally, the Pilpul as it was adapted by the Ashkenazi yeshiva, and how it was combined into the Seder Yom, the daily life, the everyday life of the yeshiva. Now I would like to continue to another one, more than 100 later. It was written by one of the most interesting figures in the Jewish intellectual, the Polish Jewish intellectual, early modern, Natan Hanover, the writer of Yeven Metzula, the chronic that related to the riots of 1648, but he is much more interesting than the composer of Yeven Metzula. He wrote a lot of things, and he is typical, what I used to call Darshan Noded, itinerant preacher, one of the most important figures, not he, the Darshan Noded is in the intellectual history of the Judaism of the Eastern Europe, not in the traditional Judaism in Europe, both Central and Eastern, but we are going to focus on the lamentation on in the Ukraine communities that were destroyed by the Cossacks in 1648. It's based on the פרקי אבות, על שלושה דברים העולם עומד, על התורה, על העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים. Each one is a pillar, the pillar of עבודה, the pillar of charity, and the pillar of Torah. We are going to check one passage from the very long part of the first pillar, al Torah. But before that, I would like to go back for a moment to the, let's call it in the journalist's language, cover story of our three meetings. I would like to repeat, because yesterday we came at the end of my paper, our discussion in the workshop, into so much details, so I would like to remind you. The most important thing for me is to show that there is a line, the divide between the medieval or late medieval or beginning of the early modern. Let's leave the European meaning of the term and to the modernity. To the modernity, I don't care about which modernity, early, late. I would like to see, just like to emphasize, there is line that differ between the tradition, Ashkenazi way of writing, way of learning, way of everything. I insist to say that it's oral. The most important thing for us was that there is no text. Pictures enough. I showed that I claim that there is no text. The last text is the authoritative, and it's not authoritative. It's as if authoritative, and that will bring us to the borderline of the printed books time, that there is no way to create, to live. Community can't stay with a printed culture if the main important tool to transmit their knowledge, their heritage, their traditions is oral. Just because this point, because there is no text. It changed all the time, and only the last phase is relevant. So if you print something, even it was in the second that you print it, it was the last phase. After a minute, it's not. So I dared to call it a crisis. You can adapt it or not, but I would like to say that there is this line between the oral, as if oral culture, it's semi-oral, because they use the book. I told you, I described how they learn. They have a text, but everything from the text on, it changed all the time, even the text itself, although at the beginning, they used only the marginal, the glossary, but the glossary were they created, they didn't write books, only glossary. The glossary on the book, the book was changed. This kind of book that supposed to be authoritative lost its place in the time that the printed book, just a moment, when the printed book took its place in the Bet Midrash. Not in the printing, when the printing press started, not in 1455, when Gutenberg, I hope that I'm not wrong, published his Bible, but about 100 years later, when the books start to be the most important tool for learning in the Jewish communities, not only the Jewish, but it wasn't in the same time, and not in each community, Eastern or West, Central, it happened in the same way. So I repeat about what I like to say. We have to divide it. That means that I look at the 16th century, the beginning of the Jewish modernity, not in the meaning of the Maskilim and not the meaning of the 18th century, not in the Enlightenment, but the modernity started when they had to rebuild all the cultural world from the beginning, from many respects from the beginning. And when it come today or tomorrow to the printed Talmud and the influence of it, and what they did to the especially for our task for the interpretation of the Talmud, we'll understand it better, I hope. Yes.
Ask you to make explicit the point that's already implicit in here, and then you want the timing. From some of the things that you said yesterday, talking about the history of the second Mordechai, talking about the appearance of Pilpul in the mid-15th century in Ashkenaz already, it almost seems as if this crisis of orality was already there, and the printing press, when it arrived, came as a solution to that. Whereas the other way of looking at this is to say that the printing press is what occasions the crisis. Which of these two is it?
Yes, it's very interesting interpretation. Did you finish? Sorry. Okay. It's very interesting interpretation, but in order to divide between the kind of the type of the library before and after, I prefer to use the crisis. You're right. We can describe the events from the story of the Mordechai, from the decline of the Tosafist literature in the 13th century. That if you remember, that was the beginning of my lecture yesterday. The decline of the Ashkenazi culture from the 14th century to the early 16 or end of 15. In order to sharpen it, I prefer to continue to use the crisis, because I will focus in the crisis points. I agree with you that we can look at it as a process for sure, and to look at it as a solution. It's another way. But as I told you, crisis is just a dream, just in the brain of the historians. They use it again and again without any reason. But it's just very short and very useful word. Although when it comes into details, we will understand exactly what we mean, either in your way or mine. Okay?
So you refuse to call this chicken or egg?
I prefer not, in order to keep the linear way of thinking. Okay? Great. So that's the introduction, that it was very important for me to remind you what we are going to say, because the most important thing is the modernity. The modernity not in the modern meaning of the word. The modernity is the beginning of new process, not medieval by far, and the process will take us along. You can find it until now, until Oded and Reb Chaim and the Lithuanian yeshivot, etc., and that will be much clearer. I'm not just try to challenge Oded. Tomorrow when we speak about the influence of how the printing of the Talmud affected the modern yeshivot, the yeshivot of Poland, not the German, you will understand me better, I hope. Let me come into the just a moment. Now I have to make a long tour until the place that I'd like to start. First of all, we start in yesterday, if you don't mind, for this one. I will read it, I don't have it. Some passages I found in my computer translation into English, and I will put it in the computer. I would like to read, that's the beginning, the opening of the lamentation, one of the third chapter, the most of this beautiful lamentation that I mentioned, that were written by this highly interesting guy that my dream is, before I finish my life, to write a small book about this Nathan Hanover that I feel close to him personally, I must say. Not that I'm a itinerant preacher, but that's the problem, that I'm not. Anyhow, עמוד התורה, the pillar of the Torah, המפורסמות אינן צריכים ראיה. שלא היה כל כך הרבה תורה, that's the image. Here you see the image of Poland as a center of the Torah of the Ashkenazi culture from the mid-17th century. He wrote it, the first edition of Yeven Metzula is 1650. 2 years after the ending of it's not ending, it's continued after that in central Poland in the 50s, but it's 2 years, 3 years after the beginning, he continued. He knew he was very easy writer. He has he unbelievable guy, but it's not our topic now. עמוד התורה, המפורסמות אין צריכים ראיה, we don't have to prove that never was so much Torah in the Jewish, in the old diasporas of the Jewish people as it was in Poland. בכל קהילה וקהילה, in each community it was yeshiva. In each community, it's historical, it's not just lamentation. In each קהילה there was a yeshiva. בכל קהילה וקהילה היו תופסים ישיבות. It's Talmudic term, לתפוס ישיבה. That means ראש ישיבה. והיו מרבין שכר, that's the reason. The Polish Jewish community was very rich, very, very rich, and they hired the most important scholars all over the Ashkenazic diaspora. They brought in, and they moved from one community to another. So they were tempted to move to more rich community. That was the story of Hataz, of Aturei Zahav, of Beit Chadash, all the famous scholars. Only one I know that stayed all the time in one place. That's the name of the Israel will be one of our protagonists in the continuation of our meeting today. והיו מרבין שכר, paid a lot to the ראש ישיבה, in order שיוכל לתפוס ישיבה בלא דאגה ולהיות תורתו אומנותו. Look how he proved it. ולא יצא ראש ישיבה, he never left his house all the year long, לחוץ only to the בית מדרש or to the synagogue. ולכן היו בכל קהילה וקהילה הרבה חכמים, אם הייתה קהילה מ-50 בעלי בתים, 20, if they have 50 householders, בעל הבית it's a middle class, high middle class figure, that's, am I right in the translation? Okay, I believe that everybody knows what I mean. אם הייתה קהילה מ-50 בעלי בתים, 20 of them had the title that parallel to for doctor, yes? Moreno, that's the highest title in the yeshiva. או בשם חבר, חבר it's one stage lower. והראש ישיבה היה על כולם, that's the most important sentence that you know, that you remember for yesterday, that this was from the 15th century. The ראש ישיבה, it means the most important figure in the circle of the learned figures in the community. It's not house and it's not institution, it's abstract. והראש ישיבה היה על כולם, וכל החכמים היו נכנעים, etc., etc., they have to come to the Rosh Yeshiva. Now we are coming to the point. It's quite complicated and it's long. I will read it and I will emphasize the important things for us that basically to the point that we related to it yesterday.
And perhaps a question, if the community was composed of 15 householders or people who are negative, how big we could assume the community was? How many people are in a community with 50 negative?
I can tell you there's no way to say that because there are many kinds of communities. Just like to say it in comparison, if they have 50, 20 of them were Moreno, just יחסית, how many תלמידי חכמים מובהקים היו בכל מקום. כמו שבעצם, what he said is that the high middle class is built not only from rich people, by the way, but by תלמידי חכמים. That's the way that he described the Jewish community in Poland, not the rabbis. He doesn't speak about the scholar, about the Jewish community. That's the picture of the community. 20 scholars, 20 Moreno, the highest stage of the scholars, from 50. Let's you can calculate by itself, but the calculation, it's not description of the community. והיו הולכים כל החכמים ובחורים שבקהילה. Now it reminds us something from what happened in Padova, in the Rabbi Yehuda Mintz Yeshiva, but we are coming soon. I'll tell you from the beginning what I like to show here. All the structures that we learned yesterday about the methodological meaning of the Shiur Pilpul, that all the restrictions and the boundaries that the yeshiva עטפה את עצמה, ברכה לי המילה, never mind, surrounded it, disappeared. Now, the head of the yeshiva is in the center, not as a teacher, but as a most important civic, as a high important scholar. So the structure survived, but the goal of the text disappeared, and the pilpul that was marginal, as if, although it was very, very yokrati, very forgot, never mind, even though now the pilpul, he is a goal by itself, without any restriction. That connected us to what happened when the Talmud was printed, but that we'll speak tomorrow, I hope. והיו הולכים כל הבחורים, והראש ישיבה לבד, ישב על כיסא, sat on the chair, the opposite, exactly the opposite as Kapsali described the situation in Padua, וכל החכמים ושאר בני הישיבה stands, ניצבים עליו סביב לו, והיו מפלפלים. The beginning it comes from the students, not from the rabbi. If you remember, the head of the yeshiva started to ask and teach the student how to answer, to teach what is a question, what is a kushia, and what is truth. That's the idea of the pilpul. I forgot to tell you something yesterday. Let me say it in משפט מוסגר, in a closed sentence. The pilpul deals only with the passage itself, without any comparison. You don't bring something from outside. You do only the text itself, everything, all the creation of the pure pilpul. There are many kinds of people. The pure people, the kind of Padova, and what stands behind in the background of this one also, is dealing in the sugya itself, just philologically, syntactically, etc., but not what will be when the Talmud will be printed from brachot to nida, means from the beginning to the end. Then we come going back to the Tosafit system, to look at all. So we'll speak about it tomorrow. But the most important thing is it's only in the first 4 lines of the sugya that Rosh Yeshiva said you have to start tomorrow here and to finish here, and exactly that's the place. Because that's the only part that we are going to discuss tomorrow, not tomorrow, then. Okay?
Not here. He was already discussing other subjects.
כן, תכף נראה. But the pure pilpul, it's not. That's exactly what I'm showing, that something was changed. But the idea, the pilpul as the backbone of the yeshiva survived. Am I right, Milo? Mr. Milo, or Rabbi? Okay, it's what survived from Kapsali to Hanover is the Pilpul survived as something very, very yokoti, very prestigious. Sorry, I see that tomorrow they forgot a lot of words, and very prestigious, and started as the backbone of the yeshiva, of the Tochnit HaLimudim, of the program, and that started already in the end of the 15th century, as it reflects in early 16 by Kapsali. Yes.
It seems to there are three parts here.
A bit
It seems to
louder.
there are three parts here, like the Alcha, the Pilpul, and the Chiluk.
But you didn't, let's read it. I agree, but let's read it. It appears here, so let's read. Let's continue to read.
Question.
Yes.
At what point might have been written down the first kind of?
I can't hear you. Can you repeat louder?
At what point might have been written down? Excuse me, perhaps a manual laws of Pilpul. Did that ever?
I'm not sure. I can't hear you well. But if you ask about if there was a manual of the Pilpul, there is only one that I mentioned yesterday, but it was Spanish. It was Fardish. It was done by Canfanton in the end of the 15th century in Spain, and they knew it. They knew it, and they look at it as a guide. But the Ashkenazi Pilpul slowly become absolutely another thing.
So they never wrote their own guide.
There is a lot of way to write a guide to the Ashkenazi Pilpul because they relate to it in many ways and in many manuscripts, but you have to collect it. There is no guide, but you know when we speak about Regensburger, Nuremberger, or Gurnish, as we saw yesterday, each of them it's another system. If you just like to write, to characterize each of them, you have some beginning, very nice beginning to the guide to the Pilpul. But it was done. It was done by scholars like Dimitrovsky that I mentioned yesterday, but Reiner, that was the first one to deal with that. There are some scholars that try to understand what does it mean, the Ashkenazi Pilpul, and I think the most important Dimitrovsky from any respect. Sorry?
The Shla has a part in
Yes, but Shla is, yes, I agree. Yes. Although he doesn't like people so much. He does it and criticizes it. But that's most of them. Besides the Maharal.
Besides from Canton and other guides.
Yeah. Yes, thanks. Tzvi mentioned, if you didn't hear, like if you have the problem like me have, Tzvi mentioned the Shla, Rabbi Yeshayahu Levi Horowitz, it was a rabbi of Frankfurt, in Prague. At the end, he died in Tiberias after quite 2 terrible years in Jerusalem. And he has a huge book, I believe that most of you heard about it, Shnei Luchot HaBrit, what we call Shla, Shnei Luchot HaBrit. And in Masechet Shavuot, if I'm not wrong, is divided by Masechtot, partly. There is many kind of names. In Masechet Shavuot that is very, very famous because that in this part there is a dream of Rabbi Shlomo Alkavetz about Tikkun Leil Shavuot, about the learning something highly interesting, but not for us now. And he has something that we can call guide to Pilpul in this part of his huge, unbelievable book that never was learned by scholars, by historians or by other people. It's a book that is still satum from many respects. Hala. Now,
one other question?
Yes, of course. As I would like to remind you, we are in workshop, not in a lecture. So that's exactly what you expected. That's exactly what you expected.
And the tool of this reminder.
You're not British. You're not British.
I was on Anyways, regarding functionality, repeating the question from yesterday, because here once again it seems that the people is as a purpose.
Just a moment.
להעמיד הלכה על עלייה, and this sort of intertwined.
Asi, can you repeat? I had a small problem.
I'm asking again about the functionality here.
Yes.
Because it seems to me here even more strongly than before, there is a function of the Amid, the Alpha Al-Buya, and there is a connection between the people and the topics that are there. It seems here that it's intertwined into the functional study and not differentiated. Is something completely to do with method or?
Yes, I agree. How do you interpret the word halakha in this context? Halakha is not decision. As I mentioned yesterday, halakha is the page. Lilmod halakha means to learn the page of the Talmud with Gemara, with Rashi, with Tosfot. It's term that's connected only to limud. Halakha by itself is halakha, is to make decision, not to make, to learn what halakha is, the summing up of the sugyot. What halakha ke. But here, halakha, it was also in Kapsali, halakha, it's one, there is, halakha in this context has one meaning. The page, to learn fluently the daf, the page of the Talmud. So here halakha is the page that we are going to discuss. The passage from the daf, from the page of the Talmud that we are going to discuss.
So I can understand why that's different from the scheme, but I can't understand to what extent it's different from what we saw as the Tosfot, you know, as the learning of the page, which of course has to do to some extent in the end with Musika.
Yes, I agree, but we have to understand what we mean. But they use the term halakha from Zman Tosfot, that as I mentioned, I hinted yesterday, I'm not sure that I said it clearly. The Zman Tosfot died. It also beginning when the old program of the yeshivot started to organize itself. But at the end, we don't hear. I know about the term Zman Tosfot only from the mid-50th century. Am I right? The Zman Tosfot, do you know it from the 17th century? Tzvi deals with the Prague yeshivot in the 17th century. What?
I think there is time for, like at the end of the semester, for being purposely, just like learning.
Just to learn in the daf.
No, the opposite. At the beginning of the semester, they study the text with each other, or with the.
I know what you mean.
And then at the end of the semester, they have time for.
To make pilpul. Again, you take it from here, that he said it. Natan Hanover described it. But it's just the opposite what Asi asked. At the end of the semester, the yeshiva is taking apart. So each of them has the right to do what the Rosh Yeshiva used to do in the beginning. You understand me? That's the story that you mean. At the end of the semester, what we call till now, Sofa Zman. Sofa Zman is the meaning is that there's no rules anymore, and just each of the students can do whatever he wants. And then they have the right to function as Rosh Yeshiva, to say pilpul. That's what Natan Hanover, it's Natan Hanover, it's not Prague, although he moved to in all the places, but not here, not in the passage that I'm bringing here. So let's go, just to go back to the ritual itself, and not to spread all over the Ashkenazic realm. כל אחד היה מקשה לראש הישיבה, מה שקשה לו בהלכה, והוא מתרץ לכל אחד. Exactly the opposite as Kapsali. Each of the students start the process. He asks Rosh Yeshiva. Rosh Yeshiva is sitting as the head of the court. I'm bringing you my problem and you have to solve them. Kapsali, exactly the opposite. He asked because he intended to teach הקטן בקטנותו והגדול בגדלותו, what is the תירוץ, what is קושייה, it's a training how to discuss סוגיות. That's not the story here. The story here is how the Rosh Yeshiva is important and how the students are very knowledgeable people. אחר כך שתקו. That's the beginning. The opening is, כל אחד מקשה לראש הישיבה מה שקשה לו בהלכה. בהלכה הכוונה, the meaning is in the page, והוא מתרץ, and now he is like a magic, knows everything. he solved all the problem. אחר כך שתקו כולם, everybody is silent, it becomes silent, וראש הישיבה אמר מה שחידש בהלכה. Now he starts with his own novelties, without any connection to the questions. That again, not as we learned yesterday. We learned yesterday that everything is connected, and at the end, מוציא לאור תעלומה. There is no here. We lost the situation that all the process bring us to a new creation. Here is the Rosh Hashiva personally, he is a figure. So he started to bring his novelty on the Sugya, on the Masechet, in the same tractate. כן, נסקא דרב אבא ובבא בתרא, או מה שאנחנו רוצים. What is the meaning of this step? It's very important to the שיעור, to the פלפול hour. כל אחד היה מקשה לראש הישיבה מה שקשה לו בהלכה, הוא מתרץ, אחר כך שתקו, וראש הישיבה אמר מה שחידש בהלכה הוא עצמו, actually, exactly what the student did, but he is ראש הישיבה, ואחרי שאמר כל החידושים, look, that the word חידושים, it's not so, it's Spanish, we know it חידושי הרשב"א, but here in the Ashkenazi poem, חידושים it's quite new, and you told me that you are going to write about the חידושים? Yes. ואחר שאמר כל החידושים, אמר ראש הישיבה חילוק. חילוק, it's highly important, professional term of the pilpul, although it is highly important, it's not quite clear what it is because it changed from time to time. There is chiluk and there is pilpul chilukim. There are many kinds, and it started its career in the language of the pilpul, the old pilpul, as we met in Kapsali at the end. But here the chilukim, it's relate usually. I'm not sure that I'm right. I just suggest the heart of the chidush. The most sharp and brilliant point of the chidush, when it comes, and we'll see soon how the chidushim were built floor higher than the others, floor by floor, and the top of it, that's the chiluk. That's the chiluk pilpul, and that's the meaning of pilpul chilukim. That might be that tomorrow we'll come to it during the discussion of the figure of Rabbi Yaakov Polak, the mythological founder of the Polish yeshiva. אמר ראש ישיבה חילוק, דהיינו, what does it mean חילוק? He asked question on the Talmud, on the page, or either Rashi or Tosafot. You can see how it's one composition. Like Rashi al Torah. They can understand, it's not that we have Bible and Rashi, and that is Takanot Krakow. It's forbidden to teach Bible without Rashi. Forbidden to teach Rashi, not without Ramban, not without... And Rashi is part, he says, the glue that make us possible to learn text. And exactly here. The glue that is quite easy to understand in the Bible here is Rashi and Tosfot, and that is a text. That's a text. From here on, we can make our novelties to start learning. That's the reason that we can make pilpul not only in the text, even in the Rashi and the Tosfot, and that's a text. שדבריהם סותרים זה את זה. That's the basic of the Talmud, pilpul. Pilpul started what we called in yesterday kshia, the pilpul meaning that we find contradictions in the text itself, and that's the first step into the pilpul. Since then, we start to use all the professional terms of the pilpul. ומתרץ אותם. Yes, he said the pilpul, Rosh Yeshiva, he bring the two things that contradict each other. He asked kitzurim or stirot, another two terms of the pilpul. Everything is from the dictionary of the pilpul, the professional dictionary of the pilpul. Chiluk, kitzurim, mibachutz, stirot, etc., etc. Makshe kitzurim, and they don't have to say what. I can say, you can say to me, אני מקשה קיצורים, I have to ask קיצור. You can answer me, I answer you חילוק. And they know exactly what does it mean. It doesn't have to give all the text from the beginning to the end, but it just very short and very sharp way of discussion about the sugyot. מקשה קיצורים או סתירות, you see that how the history of the people is still here, but all structure, the social structure, it changed dramatically in the putting of the Rosh Yeshiva as a mefalpel, not as a teacher. Not all the methodological aspect of the ritual disappeared. מקשה קיצורים או סתירות בגפת, גפת means גמרא, פירוש, תוספות, to somebody who doesn't know that, ומתרץ אותם, והתירוצים גם כן, and the solutions, the solutions also, the next floor, we started the first floor with, of קושיות ותירוצים, now we found the תירוץ, and then we come to the first floor, but in the תירוץ itself, we discovered this contradictions. Am I clear? And now all the process started from the beginning, as if. והתירוצים גם כן סותרים זה את זה. And he said on each קושייה, another תירוץ, etc., etc., until all the building is set, and הסוגיה עומדת עד שההלכה means the page רעשי, the סוגיה itself עומדת על בויה, stand clearly. ולפחות, not as, here he insists on saying, the opposite things that we saw in Kapsali. In Kapsali, they insist to finish the discussion in 1 hour, that you measure it according to the sugya and the chiluk. Here said, "Einam holchim ad achar hatzorayim." It's not morning, from the morning to, that's the most important event of the day. ולפחות אינם הולכים מן הישיבה עד אחר הצהריים בקיץ. Now they started what צבי hinted to it, מחג השבועות או מחנוכה ואילך עד חג הפסח או עד ראש השנה, means the end of the זמן, of the semester. הראש הישיבה אינו מרבה בחילוקים. He stops to rule, to conduct the ritual, וכמה שבועות לפני ט"ו באב means really the end of the semester. In ראש חודש אלול it's finished, וכמה שבועות לפני ט"ו באב או ט"ו בשבט, ראש הישיבה gives the permission to everybody, especially to the most important students. That's what you mean, that's the text that you related to, no? Never mind, look into it, וכמה שבועות לפני ט"ו באב, 2 weeks before the end of the semester, ט"ו בשבט, month before the semester, the end of the semester, ראש הישיבה gives the permission to the students, each of them to say chilukim on the yeshiva instead of him. Hand to the scholars, hand to the students. And they said the chilukim, and he became a student. He became shomea elehem, he listened, and makes pilpul as any other student. That reminds something from what happened in the liminality of the description of Kapsali that we paid attention to it yesterday. So what I like to say, I don't like now to read the third description of the people, because we have here exactly what we mean. I would like to show the structural pilpul at the beginning and what happened to it. Something happened. We saw a project. We saw a process. The process is exactly what he said before. The moving from the word of the old traditional text, Ashkenazic text, as we dedicated to it at least an hour yesterday, to the new one, to the new interpretation of the Talmud that I called modern interpretation of the Talmud, and that I leave for tomorrow, if at all. Okay, we have now the two polars of the story: the beginning in the medieval, the end of the modern, the new understanding of the text that cover a lot of it, not the story of Natan Hanover. It covers especially the beginning of a modern interpretation of the Talmud that I hang it on the printing of the Talmud itself. I speak about figures like most important figure is Rabbi Shlomo Luria. His origin is Ashkenaz, but he moved to Poland, was a rabbi in Brisk, in Austria, in other places. He finished his life in Lublin, but he wrote the first kind of interpretation of the Talmud that was written after the printing of the Talmud. I look at it as the most important event that connected to the printing of the Talmud. He founded the cornerstones to all the place of the Talmud as an intellectual phenomenon until the 19th century. We know we have Noda Yehuda, we have Pnei Yoshua, all of them depend on the neglected book at the beginning. It's called the Yam Shel Shlomo. But here we can start to put the first signs to the struggling with what I call modern culture of Ashkenazi culture. Okay? I believe that I'm not clear enough, but either I will do that tomorrow. If not, we will continue to speak, to meet, or to think by ourselves about this issue. I insist to speak about it now, just because I'm afraid that we don't have time to do that later.
If you can just very shortly remark the difference between the traditional Ashkenazi
and the disappearance of the Muvne, the pilpul, the original pilpul, as it came from the Konstantin Yeshiva, and it was started in the medieval yeshivot of the 15th century, beginning of 16 in Ashkenaz, in the old Ashkenazi diaspora, even in northern Italy. It's something that belonged to the learning of the Sugya, with either widening it to the Talmudic literature as it happened after the printing of the Talmud and the project of the Polish yeshivot in general, and especially as it came to its real direction by Yam Shel Shlomo. Yam Shel Shlomo take it as a symbol. Might be that you will decide that other hagahot are important. And I will speak about it. I hope to speak, although I'm scared, I'm afraid to speak about Yam Shel Shlomo, to speak before you about it. Okay. This is just a symbol. I'm trying I put a page an image that you saw yesterday when we spoke about Sha'arei Dura. Then yesterday I wrote it just to show how the printed press, this is the book Sha'arei Dura. Let me repeat again, what does it mean? This is the most important book of the dietary halachot, and dietary halachot are very important because they know it wasn't Rabbanut and wasn't Badatz. Each Talmid Chacham decided for himself, and that's the reason that they learned those uninteresting halachot, and very problematic and very difficult, the dietary halachot. Sha'arei Dura is the most important textbook, written in the 13th century by one of the students of Maharam of Rotenburg, before Rindfleisch, Yitzchak of Düren. Dura is Düren. And he came from Düren, and we know nothing about him, just that he wrote this textbook for the dietary laws that became the textbook for 300 years. It's the struggle about this kind of book that is very important for us. That's the reason that I put it as a first page to our discussion today, just to look that it's printed. This is the first book that was printed in Poland by two brothers that converted to Christianity, as I mentioned yesterday, the Hellish brothers that lived in Krakow, published only 5 books, if I'm not wrong. That's exactly what I told you yesterday. One of the brothers came back to Judaism in Salonika and again published the Sha'arei Dura in exactly the same way, 20 years later, about. So what I brought it here is just to show the meeting between the handwriting culture and the printed. This is a printed book. And it was, I believe, they published it in 100 copies at least, if not more. But you see, with the place of the note, of the footnotes, of the glossary, of the hagahot, if we use the scholarly term of Talmidei Chachamim, you can see it exactly as we showed yesterday, as we look at the page of the manuscript, National Library of Jerusalem, the Mordechai, Kitzur Mordechai, that we try to learn how the page looked like. with the Hagahot, with how the main text dissolve into the margin and you create a new text. Okay, this is just the first page. The most important book text is started from here. Now I fulfill a sort of permission. Yes, just a moment. A sort of something that I promised that I promised yesterday. The discussion about the ktiva, about writing. The question of writing in this very unclear time from this point of view. Yes. Who said? You did? You
yes,
like?
I'm sorry to interrupt here to ask the question.
You don't have to be sorry about it.
With regard to the previous topic, the people, and continues with the Asaf's question. It is not quite clear.
What?
For what
So repeat about the
purpose-
question.
Pardon?
So ask me the question again.
For what purpose the Bilpul was practiced or
Okay, okay.
found its way?
You are right. No, you are right. I didn't understand that what Asaf asked. I will tell you exactly. I hope in my poor English. It started as a tool, methodologically. It was a tool to understand the sugya, to ask, to answer, and then to give to the students some very complicated and very shuflal, very sophisticated tool to analyze the philological point of view of the sugya. Basically philological, but it's much larger than philological. What happened to it? And you're right, I was thankful that you asked me again. What happened to it? It didn't happen to the people. It happened to the yeshiva in general. That the yeshiva stopped to be a school, a professional school. The people who came to the yeshiva to be a moreno, to be rabbis, to be teachers, became secondary. The most important thing was it became an intellectual institution. The discussion, the disputation, as I mentioned yesterday about the German universities, European universities, the disputatio, that was a very central. This, what we read in Hanover, it's a sort of disputatio, but it was led by main figure, not always the yeshiva, all the functional part of the Tochnit HaLimudim, of the program, were pushed to the margin. They stayed till then. If somebody liked to be a Rav of middle community, not of the big community. The big community took the people who knew how to make pilpul. The brilliant students, they were adopted as rabbis. Isserles didn't ask him if he knows how to make pilpul or he knows how to decide about tarnagolet, etc., etc. They knew that he is the most important figure in the Yeshivat Krakow, and they nominated him. But basically, the yeshiva that I described yesterday was a school for rabbis, a school for making decisions. Why it was changed might be yesterday when we come to discuss the Talmud, we come to it again. But till now, let me just point out the question to your question, or might be asking. In the 100 years from Kapsali or from Maharil that I mentioned, I didn't mention by name, but I quoted yesterday, I mentioned him when I described the adoption of the people in the yeshiva, to the yeshivot that are described in Hanover, not in Hanover Times, where he described that were destroyed by, as he understood, in the end of the 16th century, early 17th, the yeshiva changed its place in the intellectual life of the Ashkenazi world. Instead of preparing professionalists, rabbis, melamdim, etc., they became departments for philosophy, as if just to compare, not to philosophy, but department for the intellectual material, considered to be intellectual material of this circle. Now this
Thank you
better?
very much. If I may, because this is exactly what I felt or why I asked. So it is not out of the need of the yeshivot themselves, but it is in a kind of competition or reaction to the outside world, is I would understand, because why should the kehilot has the need for training?
Why the kehilot of the 20th, 21st century, if we needed the humanists in the universities and finance them? It's very good question. It's very good question about the 16th century too.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay.
We don't have the answer, but we know that the question still exists.
But,
not for that, yes.
Because Rabbeinu, Rav or Moreh, this is for our, this is for the inside community and not for the outside.
No, it's inside community exactly as a doctor. No, it's very Moreno. It's a title. It's not description. Moreno, it's title. It's a professional title, not title that you are a very important guy. You are Moreno. It's not that. If I'm Moreno, I am means that I'm אני עולה לתורה. I read the portion of the Pentateuch in Shabbat. I get Shlishi, or I have Moreno has special status in the community, and Chaver also. Chaver, it's another one that I said that it's parallel to Magister. In that time, but it's a professional status. It's not only, usually it's they are very respected figure, not very, but respected figures in the community. But the function of the Moreno, it's formal status. Okay?
Excuse me.
Another question? Yes.
What did you say that life expectancy or I don't know, as you said, Talmud was very rich and something.
Neta, I can't hear you. Can you turn off the...
I asked if you think that life expectancy or financial stability has something to do with this proliferation of statuses.
I don't understand you. I don't hear you, sorry.
Does someone want to repeat my
yes,
question?
she asked if the material history of the Polish communities, which probably were much richer, that has to do with the proliferation of the new situation that people can afford themselves just to study without any worries about
what?
What?
I can't give a clear-cut answer about it, but I guess that yes. I guess it. I have to think if I, in the Pinkasim of Kehilot, if I can see saw something about it. I believe that I did, but in the last 5 years I wasn't in this topic too much, too deep, not deep enough. So I don't remember exactly now, but I know now. You know.
I forgot one thing on that. I said also life expectancy of אורח חיים. אנשים חיו יותר שנים, יותר זמן. Maybe.
Look, this is now I understand more. Look, the Moreno, it's professional by definition, but most of the great rabbis belong to the rich families of the community. For example, Mishpachat Shapira, Mishpachat Landau, and especially Mishpachat Horowitz. Most of them were highly rich merchants, and in the same time, they were very important scholars. And one of them, or two of them, were dedicated to be rabbis and head of yeshivot in many rich communities and moved to one to another. The most important figure for us not to come into it too deep is Yeshayahu Alevi Horowitz that I mentioned 5 minutes ago. He was exactly the figure. He was born in Aptai, if I don't wrong, but he became the rabbi of Frankfurt, the rabbi of Prague. He was very, very rich and moved to Palestine and lost all his money in Ibn Faruch riots in Jerusalem. But many other Horowitzes took his place in all over the Jewish communities in Eastern Europe, till now, by the way. Okay, is that okay? Let's move to the next sugya, but it's the same.
I have a question.
Here.
Yes.
So I was
Turn
just
off the
I
microphone.
don't mind turning it off, I just don't need it for us. It's not that it's okay. So the way I understood you so far is that there's this switch happening between the rabbi as sort of a craftsman of students to rabbi becoming a facilitator, which happens through the availability of printed Talmud, because now everybody can refer to the book on their own, and the rabbi does not have that same kind of authority that he used to. Is this what happens?
No. I think that the rabbi has the authority was changed. The meaning, how we're going to describe the authority of the rabbi. Of course, not in the same words, but the authority, either he kept the authority, either not. But it depends on his charisma. But the rabbi has very central. They just fortified their position in the community. Instead of other people that belong to the intellectual elite that became secondary elite, like the figures that I mentioned, that it's not like the itinerant preachers that they mentioned, but melamdim, mohalim, darshanim from many kinds. The families survived as very strong figures, but this is social discussion. It's not our business now. The position of the rabbis survived as more than that. The history of the rabbinate started in the middle of the 15th century. The rabbi community is something new, but this is not our topic now. You pointed out very interesting topic, but it will take us to the margin of our discussion, so I prefer not to come into it now. Because look, formal rabbi, it's a secondary figure. I hinted to it when I described the Hovitzers, that I told that the important figures didn't need the title, didn't need to get a certificate to be rabbis, like Israel, etc., etc. But you have to remember, the formal rabbi is secondary. The important figure in the rabbinate is the charismatic rabbis, like Israel, like Luria, like others. They find their way in very interesting way that I'm not going to describe now. It's not simple, but I can tell you that it was discussed by there's two very important books that were written about it. The first one was written about highly important historian, Jewish historian. I say it because not nobody, but only few heard about him. Reuven Bonfield wrote a book about the rabbinate in Italy. This is a beginning of the understanding what the position of the rabbinate, the local rabbinate in the time that we are discussing now. The other one was written by Israel Yuval, also only in Hebrew. Reuven was translated into English. Israel Yuval wrote a book that he by himself denied it. He doesn't like the topic anymore, but it's a highly important book. It's called in Hebrew Chachamim B'Doram, about the 14th century rabbinate in Ashkenaz, 1415. And I wrote a paper that I sent it to you, I think. It's not so important as Israel Yuval and Reuven. It's called the Rise of the Big Community. I try to discuss a Polish phenomenon that's much closer to us now. I think that I sent it to you, no? It was, yes?
Yeah.
It wasn't but it's in Hebrew, as you know. Let's go on.
But
yes.
Just to clarify, the reason I ask is because I'm trying to understand, you pointed this out and I'm keeping it constantly in front of my eyes, the centrality of the printing press to all of these goings on. So this is where my question was coming from, what changes within the practice and the structure with the arrival of printed books.
Great.
This is where I was going, not necessarily.
Let me remind you to the question of Hewlett, I think, yesterday, about the printing press, about the meaning of the printing press. And then I answered her. I'm not sure. I answered that we are not going to speak about the history of the printing press. The Printing Press is just a line, it's just a sign. We are going to speak about two periods, two stages in the Ashkenazi culture. I called it Printing Press. It's not history of the press, period. We're not going to discuss it. I can say that the appearance of such composition that bounded all the Talmud from the beginning to the end, and that we have a new tool in the Bet Midrash that open new horizons to analyze it. That's the story. It's not, where the name Bomberg will be mentioned by me only by mistake. He's not so important. He's important, as I mentioned yesterday, but basically we're speaking about how the library was changed, how the tool is saying, the text was changed. That's the reason, that was very important to say, that what happened to the yeshiva, it became more intellectual than professional. That's what happened. And if you can explain it by the printing press, okay, let's do that. But it wasn't in vain that I decided to take the pilpul as to show the changing. It was intellectual, from professional to ideic. Am I clear?
Yeah.
So it's much easier to say the printing press. That's the reason that I use it. We are not going to write the history of the printing of the Talmud. Just the appearance of a new tool, new formation of the text that we're discussing it from the beginning to tomorrow at 12 o'clock.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm clear?
Yes.
Great.
Can the development of the people be compared to what happened some 15,000 years, some 1,500 years earlier, with the development of the sophists against the traditional culture of training philosophy?
It's too courageous to take you challenge, I must say. Yes, I agree. There is a way to go to check the connection, all the surrounding. I prefer to speak about the Talmud itself, and it's methodologically, it was aimed just to the Talmudic text. Even we can find sources for influence, like you mentioned now. I don't deny it, but now, more than now, I don't deny it, but I deny that this would happen in those special Batei Midrash that we are dealing with now. Okay. Now we are coming to a highly interesting issue that I like very much, I must say. Somewhat very strange. The question of the meeting between the printed text and the question of writing, You can understand that. That's the reason we started yesterday about the question of the Ur text, that was not at all. But the free writing, what we allow, and that raise the question, if there is a question, if we're allowed to write everything, something or not? Let's read some text. From my point of view, first of all, the question of writing is a question that we witnessed, all of us, during the discussion till now. But now we'd like to read text, how they look at it, not we as scholars, how they look at it, how they came to embodiment, to be real in the discussion in the 16th century scholarly life. Okay? And we have to understand, just a moment, let me finish one sentence. Now we're going to check another moving from one stage to another, but not the same as yesterday, not from 15th century pilpul to the new pilpul of the 17th century, but something has happened in the yeshivot of Poland itself, the yeshivot of Poland themselves, okay? From the first yeshivot that we know about, and I will give you a short description of the three generations of the Polish yeshivot, just to design the map that we are going to make our tour with. Yes, something like, yes. Sorry?
This text that's on the screen now, is it correct that you don't have it on paper?
No. Only screen. No, you don't have it here.
Okay, good.
No. They absolutely not. But what happened here? It's not here. No. I know. They're absolutely okay.
The opposite side.
I understand. I hope that I didn't.
Yes.
מה? רגע, זה ההתחלה, אני צריך לסוף. עוד, התמונה של השרידור צריכה להופיע פעמיים, רגע. לא, זה הראשון, עוד אחד. תרד למטה. הנה, זהו. מצוין. Let's see. As you can guess, every phenomenon, a cultural phenomenon especially, raise discussion about it, even dispute about it. Nothing is accepted easily. First of all, the old people try to defend their old positions, and the new one, they try to push to the new one. Even sometimes in the same generation, there are people who oppose and they adapt in the same Bet Midrash. Always, the defenders of the old, sometimes, because it's so difficult to do that, became very creative and wrote highly interesting texts that discovered for us the old world in a new way that nobody thought about it before. That's the story of the book that I would like to show you now. It's called Vikuach Mayim Chayim. It was written by one of the most interesting figures of the 16th century, end of the 16th century, no, middle of the 16th century, the brother of Maharal. If he was not the brother of Maharal, each of you could have heard about him before that. It was the tragedy of to be a brother of a very famous guy. Everybody knows about Maharal. Nobody knows, not nobody, Tzvi knows a lot, I believe, and others too. And Yossi, I believe also. Chaim ben Betzalel, one of the four brothers, each of them were very important, but the most important were Maharal. Even only few people understand exactly what he did. But Chaim ben Betzalel was very important scholar and very creative figure in many other fields. And from my point of view, he wrote the most important manifest of the conservative halachist of the mid-16th century. His introduction to his book basically, it's again, emendations, hagahot, glossai on the new book, revolutionary book that was written by Israelis. Both of them, Israelis and Chaim ben Betzalel, were students in a yeshiva of Lublin. The yeshiva of Lublin was very yukrati, prestigious yeshiva. Only few students were there. Most of them we know by name. You can name them easily. But the most important figure was Reb Shalom Shachna, the head of the yeshiva, that was a student of Yaakov Polak that I've already mentioned, the founder, the mythological founder of the, I insist to say mythological, but we know only a few things about him. And Reb Shalom Shachna, he was the teacher of one of the two figures that I'm going to deal with. Israelis wrote a book, it's called Zot Torat HaChatat. That was the cornerstone for his Shulchan Aruch. I will come to it later, I hope. He wrote the book Zot Torat HaChatat, that perhaps the two texts, I'm saying it now, the two texts, the introduction of Chaim ben Betzalel to Vikuach Mayim Chayim and the introduction of Israelis to Zot Torat HaChatat belonging to Para Aduma, that we need Mayim Chayim, pure water for that, and that Vikuach Mayim Chayim. He mentioned his name in the title, but he hinted to Vikuach Mayim Chayim on the Torat HaChatat. In Torat HaChatat, I don't believe that somebody else besides Chaim ben Betzalel understood how revolutionary was Zot Torat HaChatat. And he came to fight against the first modern book that, from our respect, that was published in the Ashkenazi QM in the scholarly circle that we relate to it now. Okay, so basically, remember that we have two texts that conduct a dialogue between them. When Chaim Betzalel wrote Vikuach Mayim Chaim, Isserles wasn't in life anymore. He died immediately after he died very, very young. He died in the 1573, and Vikuach Mayim Chaim were written later and never was, or it was published only 150 years after that. Means he was not accepted by the scholars. They opposed, attacked the figures that attacked Rema in one from some meanings. But the discussion between Chaim Betzalel and Rema is highly interesting. Interesting even literally, even from as a literature of the time. So let's read it and to start to understand the question of writing, the right to writing, and why. And the question is present as: do we have the right to write halachot? Are we allowed to write something that has to be oral? And now we will understand what the meaning of the oral. The oral, it's not, it has to survive oral, but it has a deep meaning that let's follow it. It's interesting, even it's unique and it's not accepted, but we shed light on the understanding of writing in the Ashkenazic world and something connected to what we did yesterday when we spoke about the urtext and the liquidness of the Ashkenazic text in the first epoch that we...
Question for us, is becoming after the break.
Sorry, but I'm not...
We could take now.
You know what, I would like to read and to leave it, and then we'll come back to it after that, and we'll read it again. Okay? Sure. Let me see if this is a text that I have translation to it. No. Keshem, it's a very strange passage. He tried to make a fable, mashal, but he a bit failed, although a great writer, like his brother, perhaps better. But some here, the mashal, it's not so good, but you understand fully what he means. כמו שלא יערב לו, it's not tasty, to a man, only the food that he prepared for himself. I'm not sure about it, but that's what he thinks at least. כמו שלא יערב לו לאדם, רק המאכל שיתקין לו הוא עצמו, כפי אשר תאווה נפשו לאכול, ואינו רוצה כלל להיות סמוך על שולחן חברו, and he doesn't want to eat or to be next to in the table that he was invited to by his friend, exactly like that, לא יערב לו הוראות זולתו. In that way, אני לא יכול לקבל פסיקה של מישהו אחר. I can't accept decisions of somebody else. You can see that it's a dialogue that can be conducted only the high elite, only among the great students of Shalom Shachar, because you can't ask it for the mediocre scholars in the community. But the idea that you are not going to, the idea is much deeper, that we have to decide, first of all, not that we have to decide for ourselves, but the uniqueness of each decision. Each decision needs to rediscuss everything from the beginning. That's the basic idea that we like to say. Although he wrapped it with many fables, not so brilliant as he accepted to do. What? Let's read to the end. Let's read to the end, because the ideas, I don't think that he said what you like to be, what he liked to say. He just liked to say what I said now, that halacha always needs rediscussion from the beginning. Each time you can't use takdimim. You can't use takdimim. That's the reason you can't write, because writing means takdimim. You understand? That's the reason that he started to oppose. That's the reason he attacked Zot Torat HaChatat. But we'll read it. It's open to discussion. Just a moment. כמו שלא יערב לו לאדם רק המאכל שיתקין לו הוא עצמו, כפי אשר תאווה נפשו לאכול, ואינו רוצה כלל להיות סמוך על שולחן חברו, I'm not going to retranslate it, כך לא יערב לו הוראות זולתו. There is no way to use the decisions of your friends, of others. Even you can be sure that he speaks about himself, Rema, and Reb Shalom Shachner. That's the form that all the discussion is going on. וכל שכן, of course, he doesn't like to depend on the books of other writers, the last אחרונים, על ספרי המחברים האחרונים, שאין דעתו סומך עליהם בכלל. He doesn't depend on them at all. He doesn't appreciate them, I think. I'm not sure that was what he meant. שאין דעתו סומך עליהם, כמו שלא יערב לו לאדם, only the food that he prepared for himself. כמו שלא יערב לו לאדם, רק המאכל שיתקין לו הוא עצמו, כפי אשר תאווה נפשו לאכול, and he doesn't expect to be invited to host in their ready prepared table, שולחן ערוך. You can hear the hint to what does he hint, and that's the reason they make it so clumsy, let's say. ולזה מנעו הראשונים, now the rule, and that will, here we will finish, we'll stop, we'll go to break. ולזה מנעו הראשונים מלחבר שום ספר. We know, you, Israelis, and me, Chaim Betzalel, and our teacher, Reb Shalom Shachner, know that that's the reason that the Rishonim, and it's a term Rishonim, it's not chronologic. Rishonim, it's a group, very clear and definite, mugdarim, yes? A group of poskim, that's the reason the Rishonim נמנעו מלחבר שום ספר מיוחד. They refused to compose a book, a special book. And halakha, לרבים, they are not, they refuse to write a book that will be published and everybody will come to it to learn. That's the way, but I will interpret it after that. ולזה תימה ופלא, and that's the question, how רבי משה ישראל dare to write a book? My friend, my colleague. ולזה תימה ופלא, על הרב רבי משה, אשר חיבר ספר מיוחד ולא שט ליבו, לכל הדברים אשר כתבתי. He didn't pay attention to the very simple and clear and acceptable rule that we are not allowed to write books to the public. And he means Chaim Betzalel continue. That part of the introduction, don't think that that's a book. The book, very small, tiny book, some 30, 35 pages that were published in Amsterdam in Taf Ein Bet in 1712. In 1712, yes, means that it wasn't published in the real time, in the time that the discussion happened in Poland between the two great scholars, Chaim Betzalel and Israelis. So I would like to continue this, just a continuation of the same thing, but with many other interesting details. וזה לי, כמו תזין שנים, I have 16 years ago, שנתתי אל ליבי, גם אני, that I thought about writing a book. נתתי אל ליבי, גם אני, ללקט כל דיני איסור והיתר, to collect all the halachot, decisions of איסור והיתר is a general name that cover many, many fields, but especially for our discussion, the dietary halachot, dietary laws. Besides that, but it's much more, it's wider. Yoreh De'ah. What cover under the Yoreh De'ah from the four parts of the Shulchan Aruch, Arba Turim, what you can find under Yoreh De'ah, that's exactly what Isur Ve'eter is. גם אני ללקט כל דיני איסור והיתר מספרי הפוסקים. Look, not what I wrote, not what I create, what I took from like a beggar that לקט שכחה ופאה, that he take from the real fields, from the old and sacred fields, ספרי הפוסקים. אחד הנה ואחד הנה, הרומנטית, וסידרתי אותם בסדר נכון, what I did for myself, I have a pinkas, a sort of pinkas, if you remember what we said yesterday in answer to Oded's question, what pinkas is in the library of 15th, even 16th century. הלא הוא כמוס עמדי, סידרתי אותם בסדר נכון, והיו לאחדים בידי בתכלית הקיצור. I wrote only what I needed to remember, just for remind myself about the decisions, and I organized it in סדר נכון, I organized it well, and it became אחדים בידי. It was just itself, just the book, the pinkas that I prepared, הלא הוא כמוס עמדי חתום באוצרותיי. I hide it. It's in the place that nobody knows, as if nobody knows where is it. Of course, he exaggerated. He just likes to speak about the secret, about secrets. This is a secret for in his mind. והבחורים שהיו אז בביתי, the students, the yeshiva students, the yeshiva lochers, that was in his house, as you remember, both texts that we read lately, the Kapsali and Hanover, each of a Talmud teacher hosts his students in his house. That's what I told you when he studied with Kapsali about the first text, that he came from his house to be with all the students of the city just for the Pilpul. After that, all of them going back to the house of their own teachers. והבחורים שהיו אז בביתי גנבו אותו ממני. They knew about it. They tried to make their life easier, and they stole the book and made a copy without telling me, בסתר, secretly. כאשר נודע לי, לקחתי מידם אותו העתק, I took what they did, באף ובחימה, כי I composed all these texts only for myself, to be, that I could remind myself from the halacha and to help against forgetfulness, and chas v'chalila, not to let somebody to make decision according to what written there. Why? I hinted before that, but I'm afraid that we lost a text. No, sorry. This is more important. This is just was curious. This is a text that I jumped over one text, so I apologize. This is a straight continuation of the first page. If you remember just to remind you, yes, all the story that everybody has to decide, to make a decision by himself. There is no way to let somebody else to do that for you. And what I added, but it came out from the text, that each decision has to be discussed from the beginning every time that it's raised for discussion or for decision. Okay, and that is continuation. ובלתי ספק, no doubt, that Rema, that wrote Torat Chatat, means that he wrote a book on the material that it's forbidden to do, knew that. He knew that exactly. ובלתי ספק לא היה נעלם ממנו, גם כן, כי in the times that we learn together, כי בעת שלמדנו יחד, בישיבת הגאון המופלא, yes, בישיבת הגאון המופלא, מורנו רבי שחנא ז"ל, as I just to remind you, he is the most famous, perhaps the only one, from the second generation of the head of the Yeshivot of Poland, the straight student of the legendary Yaakov Polak, as I also mentioned it at least twice. And since then, the Yeshivot became quite a common phenomenon. The next generation, we know about many Yeshivot. That's the generation of the big immigration from Germany to Poland, mid of the 16th century. Not mid, first half of the 16th century, Isserles, Luria, and many others spread all over Poland. The time that Nathanael Hanover told about Poland, that never was a place in the Jewish history with such limud Torah, that's the time that started here. But the beginning is dependent on two figures. It doesn't say that we're not other yeshivot, but in the image of the historical image of the great scholars of the next generation, they remember two figures: Rabbi Yaakov Pollack, the founder, and his great student Reb Shalom Shachar. All the others spread from the like פרשת נוח, משם כן וכולי. ושמענו ממנו שערים ידעו. Of course, that's the most important text, because it's still professional institution. They try to teach את השערים ידעו, the textbook of שחיטה, of מליחה, of תערובות, טרפות, all the dietary laws as we know. הוא מלמד אותם, he teaches them שערי דורה, אותו ספר that we saw. We, the students, ask him, I don't know the sound, it's much stronger, פעמים הרבה שיראה לחבר וללקט יחד כל דיני איסור והיתר. Exactly as it came from the next passage that I read already, they stole. Here we speak not about the stolen text, but they ask him, write all the story. We need a book about the הלכות שחיטה. פעמים הרבה שיראה לחבר וללקט יחד כל דיני איסור והיתר. בסדר נכון, ואמרנו של דברנו אינו פה, he refused to do it. ואין ספק שאינו אלא מהטעם שכתבתי. He doesn't say that he said that Shalom Shachar said that. You know, no doubt that the reason that he refused to write the book is just from the reason that each scholar has to write his own book or to write his own pinkas maximum, but basically not to write at all. That's the story. Of course, is that clear?
And now he's doing exactly the opposite of what he preached, right? He's a part of what you're not in print, but you're not supposed to write that.
Yes, yes. He opposed Torah Chata. Sorry?
And give authority to Shachar.
To say that not to publish, yes. But let's see, it's just the beginning. Now that we read it, let me jump on this part. It's not important, just curiosity. And this is an English translation. If somebody will like to do that after the class, I will do it. This is highly interesting passage that was written by the son of Rabbi Shalom Shachar. In the year, we know exactly when. I'll tell you soon why, how we know when did he write it. He wrote it in the year that his father died. The year was 1559, Shin Yutet. Kislev Shin Yutet, you can see that till now in the Jewish cemetery in Lublin. The tombstone still exists, not still exists, we knew it, but as they did for all the old Matzevot in Eastern Europe, and they destroyed all the patina that has to this past. Let's see it carefully. That was what this guy wasn't so important. His name was Rabbi Israel, the son of Shalom Shachar. He was the head of the yeshiva of Lublin, but we know about him only one responsa, unimportant at all. But in this huge responsa that he wrote something in Hot Filin, he had this highly interesting passage for our business. וכן קיבלתי הלכה למעשה. That what I accept as halacha for my father. אדוני, מורי, אבי, הגאון, רבן ומאורן של כל בני הגולה. I hope that I apologize not to translate all the titles. מורנו הרב רבי שלום המכונה שחר. That's the Yiddish pronunciation of the name. Although it was drasha. Why his name is Shachno, not Shachna, not Shachna. Why they call Shachna? Leshichno tidreshu uvata shama. That's what the students made drasha with his name. מורנו רבי שלום המכונה שחנו, זכר קדוש וצדיק לברכה, הרייני כפרת משכבו. Hey kaf mem, Hareini kaparat mishkavo. That blessing or that phrase, that son said in the first year after his father's death. So it's clear that this text was written in 1559, okay? In 1559. אשר העמיד תלמידים הרבה מסוף העולם ועד סופו, מפיו אנו חיים, מימיו שותים, וחי נפשי עולמים. Now we're coming to the issue. וחי נפשי עולמים, דזמנין סגיים, many times. I ask many scholars, I ask with other scholars, we ask him to prepare a poisek. Poisek is singular of poskim, means book of psika, okay? To make a poisek. Again, like shachno, it's a Ashkenazic pronunciation. And he answered, תשובתו הייתה, מחמת רוב חסידותו ובטנותו, of course, as you can guess, since his pietism and humbleness, since he was the most humble man over more than anyone else in the world, it's not accurately. I can give you some examples that will deny it at all. And he said, יודע אני, and I know that if I will write a book, if I will prepare a poisek, people never will make psakim, but according to my book, מחמת דהלכה כבטרו. Not because I'm so great, not because I'm a genius, just because the halacha is the halacha כבטרה, הלכתה כבטראי. We spoke about it yesterday. That's old Ashkenazic rule. It's Talmudic, but I speak about the way that it was enacted in Ashkenaz, especially in Poland. That's another thing. It's not the same as the Talmudic. Just because the Hilcheta Kibatrei, they will paskin, as I said, and I don't like this. I'm a humble man, and I don't like people to paskin according to myself. Okay? The truth is, okay, let's continue. יודע אני דשוב לא יפסקו כי אם כאשר אכתוב מטעם דהילכתא כבטרא. I don't like that people will make decisions according to my decisions. רצונו לומר, what he like to say, כגון, היכא דאיכא פלוגתא, no, it's continue to speak in third form, בגוש שלישי, כגון, היכא דאיכא פלוגתא בין רבותא, no, it's, yes, כגון היכא דאיכא פלוגתא בין רבותא, when there is a מחלוקת between scholars, Jewish scholars, and he will decide that just because he is a batra. והוא יכריע או לפעמים יחלוק, now we come to the point that I would like to emphasize. Sometimes somebody will decide according to Rabbi Shachna, sometimes we will think in another way, but the rule is that there is no way, because the Dayan, the Shofet, the Poisek, has to decide only according to what he sees in his eyes. כי מה שעיניו רואות, that's the reason that יעשה כל אחד כפי הוראת שעה כאשר הם מבבו. That's the beginning. The end is not less important. That's exactly what he said, that they make halachic decisions needs to discuss from the beginning every time. There is no way to write because there is no takdim in the juridistic literature, halachic juridistic literature. The takdim has not any status according to Shalom Shachna if we interpret this text as a juridic text. But now we come to our question. From this reason, לא עשה נמי רבו הגאון. That's the reason that not he, and even not his teacher, Yaakov Polak, the two mythological figures of the Polish scholarly למדנות, לא עשה נמי רבו הגאון, מורנו רבי יעקב פולק, שום ספר. גם שום תשובה. It's not correct, but there's no full text written by Yaakov Polak or Shalom Shachar. גם שום תשובה ששלחו לו מרחוק, they didn't copy that. I'll come back to it soon. אלו הגאונים. They didn't not survive any responsa, and they didn't, when they send a responsa, they didn't keep and copy in their house. That was the way that we know from Israel. Israel copy each tshuva, each response that he wrote. We know that he copied it in his house. Somebody did it for him. Means that is the new way. The next generation is to think about the book, to read, to think that everything that I create, that I compose, we have to keep it in order to publish it once. That's the reason that Rabbi Yaakov Polak, means Gam Rabo, means Shalom Shachne and Yaakov Polak, the two generations, we don't have from them any reminds from their scholarship. That's the reason that we don't have. ששלחו למרחוק. They didn't copy, אלו הגאונים מהי תמה. Besides the fact they look at it as a Hebrews. Besides the fact they look at it as a Hebrews to copy the... Anyhow, what we read now is only one thing. The problem of Rabbi Shalom Shachna, or perhaps even on his son, is one thing. How come that now, in the middle of the 16th century, that Moshe Isserles wrote the Torah Chatat, and he wrote, he published his glossary to Arba Turim, and wrote, etc., and he's not the only one. So how come he had to explain for himself, and not only for himself, how come, what differ between the first generation of the Polish legendary scholars and the present one that they publish again and again books that became very popular and changed all the way of learning, all the way of making decisions. So what we have to think about it is to decide sorry, again, I did it in the wrong way. We have to decide how to understand this passage. Does it say something historical that was a real understanding of the way of decisions, or perhaps it's just a solution how to interpret the new situation? The most important, the legendary figures, that we don't have anything to show why they became so important. And his students, Isserles, I believe that all of you, even those who know something about Lamdanut, never heard about Yaakov Polak or Shalom Shachne, etc., etc. And each of them, even he doesn't know, heard about Isserles, Remu, as they used to call him. And might be that it's just it's a problem, mental problems. He has to explain to his surrounding what was the importance of his father, even though we didn't have any text that he wrote by himself. But I believe that there is something deeper. It's not just a question of a relationship, public relationship. Yes.
Yes, before you continue, could you quickly, briefly gloss the term takdim? I can follow what you're saying, but perhaps there is more of a technical nature.
Takdim, I believe that there is
Precedent.
Precedent.
Yes. Okay.
Juridical
Is there
precedent.
anything specific about the way that this gets used in rabbinic discourse that takes us beyond?
It doesn't use it all.
Okay.
Only in the responsa literature, always they mention Reiner could say that Maharik, Italian scholar, Ashkenazi or French scholar from one generation earlier or two generations earlier, he can quote him and quote the Spanish, the Sephardic scholars from the Ottoman Empire or others, but they quote not in a way of base the decision, but to base the claim. So they use always, it's like a mosaic. There is no something obligated. Even you bring something that dealt with the same issue, it's not, you are not obligated to follow him, not as tabdim. but they use a lot of wide literature. If you take I'm not sure that I prepared the introduction of Rabbi Yosef Karo to his Shulchan, to his Bet Yosef. He mentioned all the people who used, all the composers that he used, but this is not, none of them is obligatory. You don't need to act according to him, just to help you to think about the juridical situation. So there is no president, the obligatory president in the Jewish juridical decision, as much as I know. If somebody thinks in another way, I'll be happy to hear. But I would like to go back to the text. The text, I don't like to go in the easy way to think that it's just population, just to explain why my father was important. Because even though that's exactly what he liked to do, something serious is in the claim. It's for sure that even nobody, 3 or 4 generations earlier, will say that it's forbidden to write, to prepare decisions from the beginning. That's exactly what it might be, and I believe that it was the claim of poskim that each scholar has to rethink from the beginning about his decision. He is not allowed to use immediately. He can be helped by written texts, but he's not allowed to decide only about the text. Not to say the Shulchan Aruch katuv kach v'kach, it's written such and such. Let's go. That's the solution. It's never happened because the real case, never could be written because the case is just examples. What's written in the juridical text, even now, I think that it's logic. But here might be that it was totally opposition against writing juridical decisions as halacha, but it's come to its influence, the intellectual life, let's say, or the literary life in the borderline between printed and non-printed only here. Because to strengthen the claim that it's forbidden to write, and to make an opposition to the new elite, that the most important figure of them was Isserles. Okay, so we have to take it more serious than a public relation of the son to his father, and we saw that almost the same wrote Chaim and Betzalel. So it means that it was in the air. It was in the air. The feeling that the printing press is a threat on something. It's going against the tradition, the Ashkenazic tradition of making decision. But more than that, because they mention all the time Hilchot HaKebatrei. It doesn't relate to printing. It's just Hilchot HaKebatrei. Hilchot HaKebatrei means almost. One of the results of Hilchot HaKebatrei is the opposition to the writing of the text, because immediately we can find something will be late. So Hilchot HaKebatrei considered, and that's the reason I believe that it's come without saying, then the reason that Hilchot HaKebatrei became very, very important in the Siach, in the discourse, in the halachic discourse in Poland in the 16th century. That's exactly the discourse that we're speaking about it now, to write or not to write. Yes.
I have a question. Is it decision and writing is the same thing, or are there different genres of writing? Writings that go out as posek, that are decisions, and writings that can present themselves not necessarily as decisions, but as sharing an argumentation or bringing out a position that you can debate with, but not necessarily have to accept as a final word.
I can spend half an hour to answer you, but I will do that in one sentence. Of course, what Chaim and Betzalel speak against is against Zot Torat HaChatat. This is the decisions. Zot Torat HaChatat, that is Mevaser, harbinger of Shulchan Aruch of Rema. All the notes of Rema in Zot Torat Chotat appears in the Hagarot Rema in the Shulchan Aruch Krakow 1570, etc., etc. All of them. He didn't jump over one of them. All of them put there. He or one of his editors. But the question is relevant both to both. I believe that all the idea of preserving halachic writings, even it's just to prove even the discussion and even the decisions, comes under the same umbrella. And they have to. And now, why I'm making it shorter, even though I can speak about it half an hour, because now the next text we'll see how Israelis relate to the literature of the time, not to Chaim Betzalel. How we look at Sharei Dura, the same books that Shalom Shachner taught him and Chaim Betzalel, and not many, but some other noble scholars that got jobs after that in the community. That's for you. Yes, okay. So let's go on. This is a book, Zot Torat Chotat. It's published twice. The first edition was a year before Israelis died, Shin Kuftet, 3 years before, Shin Kuftet in Krakow, in a very highly interesting printing press of Rabbi Yitzchak Prosnitz. And this is one of his products. That's the Akdama that we are going to quote soon. That's the Akdama, the first page. And that's it's highly complicated language. So let's be careful. I will try to translate with my problematic English, but there are here many people that will help me to bring, if there is a way, a problem to understand it. This is, let me give a title. This is, from my point of view, a manifestation against the old literature, all the restrictions, all the problems, all the facts, according to the eyes of Israel, one of the most brilliant and modern in his way of thinking, discovered in the old Ashkenazic system. Although he has a problem to say that, because all the forefathers of the Ashkenazic tradition were in the time that he's going to criticize. So let's read it carefully and to decipher his phrases. אבקש את השם אשר יצאני, אף לילות תיסרוני כליותיי. I will jump over all the phrases just to go straight to the issues. לסדר סדר איסור והיתר על הדינים המבוארים בשערי דבור. What I'm going to do is just to reorganize all the dinim that all of you know are in the Sha'arei Dvorah. Let me say a very superficial rule. Everyone is going to make a sort of evolution. Not everyone, many of them use to say we are just going in the way that were paved by our fathers. Yes, we know the system. If you hear a sentence like that, prepare yourself to something evolutionary, something could shock you if you read it from in the context of it's happened, the things happen. What I'm going to do is just to reorganize all the dinim that are written in Sha'arei Dura, באשר כי הוא מורגל ונמצא ביד כל אדם, המכשלה הזאת תחת ידם. Why I'm going to make a seder, to reorganize the Sha'arei Dura? Because the book is available for everybody. The book available for everybody has a copy of the Sha'arei Dura, הוא מורגל ונמצא ביד כל אדם, and now he said the word, המכשלה הזאת. The barricade, how to say, מכשלה, trap, לא שומע. יותר בקול. Stumbling block. This stumbling block is available for everybody. Why? Why it's the book that was written by one of the Rishonim, by the authoritative figures of the generation of the Rishonim, the students of Maharam Furdenburg, and his book was textbook till now, Our Life in the first half of the 16th century. Since הגאון בעל שערי דורה תקנו לדורו, it was written for the 13th century. And then in 13th century, they were greater than us. They were Gdolim, the Chachamim, and the way that he chose to write, all the short way that he formulated his decisions or his sentences, it was enough for them. They understood Sharidur. It doesn't say anything yet. The problem is not that we are not so clever and we don't understand what he means. It's another problem. ולא כתב על ספרו רק דברים שהיו מחודשים בעיניו, או דברים הצריכים בדורו. And what is written there in Sharidur originally was only the thing that you, as readers, the natural readers of his time, could not find in another book. If it was written in Mordechai, or in Maharam, or in Rashi, Dvei Rashi, etc., he didn't write it. He knew that you can find your enough Talmid Chacham in order to know that that was what we had to do. ולא כתב על ספרו רק דברים שהיו מחודשים ביניו. Only novelties are written there, או דברים הצריכים בדורו. Either things that were needed in his age and now it's not. And now we come to the critiques. והנה בעוונות, in our scenes, לא יודע איך לתרגם את זה בנוסח הדרשני שהמילה הזאת נדרשת לו, והנה בעוונות, בדורות האלה, in our generation, האחרונים, remember the two polars, ראשונים אחרונים, now we don't understand. His words are סתומים, are not left for interpretation. דבריו סתומים וחתומים היו כלא היו. Now, what happened? Since his saying are not understandable without effort, עד שבשביל זה קמו אחרונים. And then other people came to interpret them. שימו לב בדיוק מה קורה כאן. עד שבשביל זה קמו האחרונים זו, וסידרו עליו דברים בהגותיהם, כדי להורות לדורות כיצד ינהגו. What we have, it's not his book. What we have is the book with the glossary, with all the additions, exactly the way of the system that we spoke about. 2 days we are trying to follow this system of learning. What we have now, it's not the Ur text, it's not the text of Rabbi Yitzchak of Duren, but another text, it's a new text. But that was naturally, that was the way of the Ashkenazic text in late Middle Ages. And the Achronim added, סידרו עליו דברים בהגותיהם, uses the same term, הגהות, כדי להורות לדורות כיצד ינהגו, in order to tell the last generation how to behave, אף שעל ידי זה היו דבריהם כמנהגים זה לזה. Although, since we have many people, they wrote הגהות on Sharidur, we can find contradictories between the Mechabrim, between the composers. So what we have now is a text full with contradictories. That's only the beginning. על אף שדבריהם מתנגדים זה לזה, זה אומר בכור, וזה אומר בכור, זה אוסר וזה מתיר, אף כי כולם ניתנו מרועה אחד, means the beginning is always from רבי יצחק of Duren. מכל מקום, anyhow, at the end, we have to face one important situation. Somebody, he doesn't have the chech, he doesn't have the tummy to eat, to להקל, to digest those sweet and מתוקים וסתומים, לא מובנים, ברוב, אינו מסיק מרוב ההגות. He doesn't have the ability to come to any decision from this very common, and each of the, as I said at the beginning, each of the scholars has his own copy of this book. ועל ידי זה נפלו הספרים, and what happened now? That according to the eyes of Reiner, he wasn't a historian, by the way, but he was a scholar that understanding that he saw it, in fact, in the real place in the real arena that happened, the things happened there. By they say now we have two stages till now. The book as was written by Rabbi Yitzhak Midun for his generation and for people he collected material, only few part of the material, because the others they were written in other places, he ignored totally. After this came the people who tried to prepare the book to be used by another people. But they put contradictories in the text. And the text was, for one, as we described yesterday. Now we came to the crisis, to the phase that the book cannot be used anymore, according of Israel's understanding. Now, what happened? Now, the people who dealt with this book were many people, small people, means unimportant, not scholars, קטנים וגדולים, עשו להם כוונים. כוונים, it's עבודה זרה. כן? עשו פגנים. כל אחד, each of them went in his own way. ובאורים שונים. הזמן קלה ודבריהם אינם קלים. They put footnotes, glossai, long הגהות. הזמן קלה, אבל they wrote more and more and made the book unimportant at all.
The reference is stronger.
Sorry?
The reference here is not stronger.
So, I'm not sure that's a Geinom. הזמן קלה ודבריהם אינם קלים. Might be, yes, accept. Okay. הזמן קלה ודבריהם אינם קלים. They continue to say unimportant things, perhaps worse than unimportant. כאשר עשו לספר הנזכר פירושים ותוספות, גם קפצו התלמידים רבים ותלו בבוקר ישראלי. מה שיש לנו היום זה חסר כל ערך. כיוון שמה שעשו האחרונים, what the last interpreters of the שערי דורה did, they made a mess that we cannot use anymore. This common textbook for everybody who like to be shochet or one of the professions that who need שערי דורה. גם קפצו התלמידים רבים ותלו בבוקר ישראלי, ישר בניו יעשה, ואחרי זה, and after that the book and the דברים הנתפסים, yes. And even though everybody look at the שערי דורה as he was given in Sinai, like the Torah. שכולם מסיני ניתנו. And the תקנת החכמים, and what the חכמים ask to make things short and clear, it didn't happen in שערי דורה. על כן, what I'm going to do, אני משה, ראיתי כי טוב לסדר סידור נכון, מכל סידורי איסור ויתר הנמצאים בשערי דורה. I'm going to write another book. ולכתוב שם אותו בדרך קצר ולא פלפול ארוך, נקל להבין לכל אדם. I'm going to write new book, short, clear, and what he did, to took out שערי דורה from what חיים באר used to call ארון ספרים היהודי, the Jewish bookshelf. Well, he going to cancel the book. He's not going to add a new hagahot on the book. He go against a traditional book, and all the patina that the traditional include, the word, the term traditional include. That was the reason that Chaim ben Betzalel became so angry. Not because he dismissed the value of שערי דורה, but he dismissed the way of learning. He took the karka, under the feet of this book. He means that it's a kind of rift, a sort of a rift in the history of the Jewish literature, in the Sifrei Halacha, in the halachic book of the 16th century. And that's exactly what happened. If you like to evaluate the project of Israel, it's really radical, and it's just because he was so important and noble, he came from a very important family. and rich and considered to be one of the most important figure in Poland at this time. Was a rabbi of Krakow. He was a rabbi of Poland, the former rabbi of Poland. He managed to do his project. His project was to reorganize all the Jewish bookshelf. He intended to write everything from the beginning. That's the reason that he decided to adapt the young Shulchan Aruch that's written by Rabbi Yosef Karo, not Bet Yosef, not the Bet Yosef. He wrote even glossary Hagahot on Bet Yosef. He decided to teach halachot from the new book without to give up all the glossary that were paid from generation after generation on the Arba'at Turim. He decided not to relate anymore to the. This was a strategic decision that we couldn't evaluate it in a way unless we try to judge his success. He changed dramatically the way of learning of the halakha in order to start a new way, to start without the system of the Hagahot, to clean the text, to face with the text itself whenever it is a text. It must be old text, it can be a new one, but clear. It's something from some respect to remind the project of Mishneh Torah, the understanding, not the text itself. The text is absolutely not. But he adapted the Shulchan Aruch, a new book, really new book, and added minhagim, and the minhagim from him it's non-canonical, it's secondary, it's not the same value as the halachot of Shulchan Aruch. He added something, and it censorized. It censored all the corpus of minhagim, Ashkenazic minhagim, and put only what he thinks that it has to be survived. And what he did with it, from my point of view, I'm sure that some yeshiva bochos that gathered here to this room will not agree with me about it. The most important thing that he decided is to give up on all the system of Hagahot. Means that he prepared a closed text, as if a closed. Rema, what did you ask? Halachot. I think the full text, as he published in Krakow in the 70s, of Shulchan Aruch. I don't speak now about Torah Chotat. The importance of Torah Chotat is just in the introduction, because everything moved after that to the Shulchan Aruch. But I'd like to say, what does it mean Shulchan Aruch? Why did it? At the beginning, he said, at the introduction to Shulchan Aruch, he said that he himself wanted to write such as Shulchan Aruch, and decided not to do that because he heard Yosef Karo and the It did it. That's written everybody, not everybody, but I'm not the only one who knows this famous sentence. But I would like to put the finger in the fact what he did. What really he did in the cultural life of scholars, of yeshiva, of rabbis, of poskim, what he did. You can say that he did exactly what Rabbi Yosef Karo did. Rabbi Yosef Karo in Shulchan Aruch, not in Bet Yosef, decided to prepare something easy to learn, to read. He divided it for the days of the week, the day of the month. He suggested the merchants to put it in the pocket when he moved from one place to another. That really the opposite thing what Israelis intend to do. What he did, he chose the only one, the first one. After that, many others did the same. But he was the first one to decide to take a new codex for a work, for teaching, clean from all the generations of Hagahot, and to start to teach the halakha as is. What happened to it? We got after that, Nosei Kelim happened exactly the same. Because he didn't go out. He didn't go out from the system. He just criticized the system, but he prepared another system that was open again and again and became from, instead of the idea to write a closed system. Not everybody can enter to it and to write, to add everything that he wish. He still wrote in the traditional system. And then, after some generation, we got the traditional page of the Shulchan Aruch that it was almost the printed form of what we knew in the manuscripts in the past. Am I clear?
So,
But the project, one sentence, but the project of Isserles, as we can see here, when he wrote his opinion about Sharidura and what happened to him, what was the fate of Sharidura along the generations, the project of Isserles was to prepare new library, to prepare new Shulchan Aruch, new Sharidura, and to go out for a new epoch, the printed time of the library. I don't know another scholar that thought about such an idea besides Isserles, because he was in the borderline. He was in Poland. Might be that if you can find it in Italy, we can find it in other places. But he was in the center of the place. That the question how to write, how to continue in the time of printing press, it was real and relevant. Ken, Yosef.
So I'm looking at the afterwards in the afternoon.
Sorry?
I noticed that there's some difference between what the Rama says and what the Talmud itself says, because the Rama is very focused about helping the scholars that are not full scholars. He's focused about the Talmudim that are still in the text of the Talmud itself. And the Talmud itself is focused about keeping authority for each Rav that is a big Rav to do his own side.
Yes.
Now, that brings me through because when it goes under the map, so he also says, anything will do the tea. I'm just making this for Ktanim.
That's conventional. It's conventional. It's repeated in each one.
Usually when I read it, I think it's conventional. But now I'm wondering, maybe it's just trying to say, listen, I'm creating a closed text for the smaller Talmud, but I don't want it to be very close. I don't want my Talmudim, the smart, to come afterwards and write what's okay. I don't care about really closing the text. I'm caring about creating some tahana, some point where we're stopping now, we're summarizing, we're concluding, and then continue on. And that's going to continue on until our days. Now we're going to wind up, have a lot of close, wind up close.
I think that what he wrote in the introduction of Torah Chatat is that we need now to overcome the pales of He'arot, that we are not could be responsible for them. There are Ktanim Gdolim, there are Gdolim in the past that wrote about, they made even them have the contradictories between in the text. And at the end came the Ktanim, that he criticized them sharply, and it doesn't left any way to think about them as a serious. So he is going to Lesader. He start to prepare something that people could use for learning. And this is very important. I think that he, one of the first scholars from within the yeshivot, understood clearly what the meaning of the printed text. He understood that there is no way for footnotes. Although your mistake is only one. But you read this text as a straight discussion between Chaim Betzalel and Rema, but he didn't know about what Chaim Betzalel going to write after his death. There is no way to I present it as a vikuach. I present it as an argument, but he didn't know that. He looked at the problem of the books. The Ashkenazi tradition could not survive in the text when we need a cut, clear text that we could not change it from one copy to another, that all the copies said the same. He couldn't. But
he doesn't know the Chaim Betzalel. He knows the person they do together.
He knows his personality. He doesn't know. He
knows about Shabbat's fine.
Of course. But this text, he didn't write this text against them. He wrote it to the people that use problematic problematic text that was changed from one generation, not from one generation to another, from one copy to another. Each of the readers added something to it. He said that it's impossible. We have to rewrite this common, very important for our life as Sharidur. That's exactly what he did.
What are the books and things that
I don't know what he mean. What does it mean? Might be that he meant the Hellich edition, but immediately in this time that he wrote, Marshall published Sharidur with his interpretation. Reb Natan Shapira from Krakow published again. It might be that they published it against Reiner. It might be, but this we need another seminar. But I'm not sure that that's exactly the topic that we gathered here to. We have another. They continue to publish Sharidur till now.
But Sharidur with their own comment.
With Rebbe's comment.
No, because it says about Reiner, he speaks about all of these.
Yes.
And then it's not only that they do it as they did before, but now they publish it.
Yes.
And this is the disaster because that is also a very
because people will learn from the text unreliable text.
Yes, because that's the problem of
yes.
But what books that he has
What books?
What books that he refers to?
I don't know. I don't know. I know that there are another editions. They continue to publish Sharidur. Although, as you know, Shulchan Aruch with Agahot Rema became the most important book for the Ashkenazic tradition at the end. He won at the end. But and it was a real struggle. But for us, as intellectual historians, the discussion is very interesting. Anyhow, it's more than that, because the tradition of handwriting, even it's not by hand, continue to I don't like to come to it now. That again, I have to go to the question of the secondary elite literature, what I called earlier the Darshanim Nodedim. There is literature in the margin that are very important, but now we spoke about not at the margin, about the center. That's the literature. That's the halachic literature. That's part of the high elite literature too. They use Sharidur. Either they use Torat Chatat at the beginning and then Shulchan Aruch Yerideh. I'm clear, or did I answer you to your question?
No, I'm not sure, because I think, I'm not sure if perhaps I don't misunderstand. Because I understand that when he says the books that's Nitpasim, that's the books that are printed now, these are not Sharidur. But books are, it's in reference to all of these students and stupid students and whatever that's made this already, not only that they did all of that,
Sharidur was printed in 1535 in Krakow. He's writing it in 1569.
Yeah, but the problem is that he is talking about the future.
Might be.
Later,
might be.
People will print these books. Like people are now.
Look, we have to remember that we are speaking here in a provincial place from the printing press history. Most of the books are printed in Italy from wide public readers. So might be that relate. He's very known. He's well known to the Italian printing press. He published by himself one of his interpretation to Megillat Esther in Italy. And all the culture of printing in Italy is now I'm coming to the field that I said that I'm not going to speak about it. The printing culture in Krakow in 16th century is Italian, by definition. This postage that I mentioned grew up in not in Mantua, forgot the printing that he was trained as a printer. But it's almost the same word. But they knew about what happened over the border, over the Alps, to be more accurate. But I think this might be just a phrase. After that, the books were printed. Well, these are dangers. There is a danger that the book will be printed and then they will present in our life, even with all those problems that I mentioned.
But then his claim is that I am not the first writer, and I create this all in order to correct the new phenomena of print.
Yes. Yes.
I'm just like Batil the Kendra Sogedel.
More than that, I think. I think Batil Amtsi. I think that there is something that he understands that is going to be something new at all. From my point of view, he is the first one in the rabbinical elite, not in the secondary, in the rabbinical elite that understands fully what does it mean to print.
Yes.
What's going to be changed soon. That's absolutely clear. Yes.
I want to come back to your comment about the importance of reading Zotrat Hatat, not through the lens of
Turn off the microphone if you don't mind.
So I wanted to say I agree with what you said, that it's so important, I think, to read Zotrat Hatat without the lens of Chaim ben Salah's later criticism.
Absolutely.
It seems to me that the way that the Ramah is presenting the justification for his work in some ways relies on the same principle that Chaim ben Salah invokes as to why this work is illegitimate, and that's Hilchot HaKavatrai. And it seems like what the Ramah is saying is that I can do this because I have the authority, I have the legitimacy to write something new. That's
very what you say now is very important. Ramah acted from knowing his authority and his fame in the Ashkenazic realm at all, not in general, not only in Poland. He know exactly his place more than that was bothered Marshall, his relative, older than him, a much important scholar than him. But the fame of Ramah was all over the Ashkenazic realm.
Because it was pop.
What?
Because it was pop in contrast to the Marshall.
Because it was
pop culture in contrast to the Marshall.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I agree that Yam Shlomo, it's not pop, it's rock. but he wrote Torat HaOlam. Marshall didn't do that. He wrote many important things.
But also, I mean, I just want to say also that I think that when Chaim ben Salah says Hilchot HaKavatrai means that every generation needs to have the opportunity to renew its minhagim and to write its own commentaries and glosses, and that what the Ramah has done is actually foreclosing that possibility, it's turning that off. That's actually a kind of reinterpretation of Hilchot HaKavatrai against the Ramah's usage of the very same principle. So it might be that the kind of distance or the radicality of the Ramah is in some sense not being manufactured by Chaim ben Salah, but at least being highlighted. That the Ramah himself might have seen himself as continuous with the Ashkenazi mode of Hilchot HaKavatrai and you know.
By the way, he used Hilchot HaKavatrai in the introduction to Shulchan Aruch, to his edition, but he used it in a very sophisticated way to adapt the old term. As I said, he must do that in order to be accepted. He must say that I'm going in the way that was paved by the fathers. So one of them he used Hilchot HaKavatrai.
But he might really believe that.
Sorry?
He might really believe that.
Might be, but if he believed it, he believed it in his own way. It's not exactly as it was in the 2 generations earlier. Not in the way that Chaim ben Salah did, for example, or the son of Shalom Shachar. More than that. What Rabbi Israel, the son, he used it in a brutal way that there's no other way. Anyhow, I think that he opened a new way to what I call modernity. Tomorrow, I think that we come to the end of my class, or what is the time?
Still have like 15 minutes.
15? I think that we'll finish here, if you don't mind. Unless there are questions that will raise another point, some other points. Yes.
We know that Ramah was also interested in philosophy and astronomy, and perhaps his intention here was to free the set time for the students, that they could concentrate on the thing more important.
Okay.
Just like Moindas did with his colleagues.
אתה מרים להם חטא, מה שנקרא בעברית. Rema, you invited me to say what I'm thinking about Rema. The Rema is unique for any respect that you wish. I wrote a paper, nobody knows about it. In the first sheet of subjects, nobody knows about it. Also, about the yeshiva for my Krakow. I try to follow the subjects that taught in his yeshiva. And just to make it attractive to read it, I just updated it. He taught history, chronography, that even quite modern, of Rabbi Avraham Zakut, Sefer Yochasim, that was published in Krakow just to teach in his yeshiva that showed him. He taught astronomy. Astronomy is the most closest text for students who like to deal with science, not new science, science in general. But the people that has inclination to Mada, to science, started his career with learning Hilchot Kiddush Chodesh of Rambam, of Maimonides. And it was taught in the yeshiva. The most important thing, and I believe that it still needs huge, serious work, it is what you call philosophy. He wrote two books that are close. One of them is clear-cut philosophy in his time. This is Torah Ta'olah that was published in Prague, not in Krakow. Not Torah Chatat, Torah Ta'olah. Both of them connected themselves to the Mikdash, to the temple, as you know, and it is very common in the Renaissance period, not only among Jews. I try to follow his methodology, not the philosophy, not philosophy, but how he used sources and in what way he did it. And I did it for some texts of his. So that's the most important of them. I didn't publish yet. I believe that I never will do that. It's an analysis of a discussion that he had in the response of his response. He wasn't the editor of his response. It was published in the year Taf in 1640, 70 years after he died. I mean, somebody just collected from the rooms of his house some response that did it. And there are many things that it's not by him. Never mind. The most interesting part from my point of view in Rema response is the correspondence between Rema and Luria and Marshall. Everybody, you know the problem of rationalism, that the school that came out from Harvard was the school of Tversky. Everything in the 16th century was judged by the rationalist or rationalist. Everything. There is no another way to judge, to analyze text in the way that in the time of my teachers. That's what I learned from Ben Sasson. So I'm not to blame them. I learned from them, from all of them a lot. But this point destroyed the possibility to understand what happened in the 16th century. Everything they divided the world for rationalist community and unrationalist. That helped them to understand the ways of Kabbalah, etc. It was the most stupid way to understand. Sorry, don't quote me, please, because I don't like to meet my teacher in the word to come when they come to that. But and I really learned from them that the tradition of Tversky in Harvard. And he inherited to his students, and you can find it in literature of people that are still alive, so I don't like to mention them by name. Nothing to do with rationality in the dialogue between Rema and Isserles. Nothing to do with rationality in all the question of learning Moreh Nevuchim in the Ashkenazi community. This is the most important thing. The Moreh Nevuchim was one of the most important books in the Ashkenazi library, but they were some restrictions how you can learn them. I don't like to come to it now. I just like to cancel the Tversky tradition in the Jewish scholarly, and to go back to Rema. What if we take what I said now accurately? That means that we have to restart reading all the text in another way and to find a way to read it, because even the most important book about Torah Ta'olah that was written by another Ben Sasson, the son, the brother, the young brother of Chaim Hillel, Yonah Ben Sasson was his name. the father of Menachem was a son, it's more famous than all of them. And he wrote his dissertation on Torah, and he went in exactly in the same way. So he lost all the possibilities to follow what he did methodologically. Sorry, I'm too tired to pronounce the word as they deserve to do that. I will say one sentence just as opening to way how to deal with the Remah project in general. It's come not only from this discussion with Duria, not only on the Torat Haolah philosophy, and not on Mechir Yain, his invitation to Megillat Esther that he published in Israel. What Remah did, and I think that quite important, you have to evaluate it by yourself. I look at it as central methodology to deal with Ashkenazic literature of Islam, especially philosophy. They use to each text as Talmudic text. They have I speak only about language. The language they use is a Talmudic language. That's the way that they know, and they use it perfectly, and they didn't have to pay any price for this, not decision. That's what they know. They didn't learn in the Italian schools. They didn't learn in the Agilonian University in Krakow, and even not in Lublin. But they knew how to learn. They were scholars. They learned a lot. They knew, I believe that they knew some languages too, not all of them. But the most important thing is to read the text not as Talmud, but as the language they use to discuss is a Talmudic language. Not Talmudic language, a scholarly language, Lamdanit, Safa Lamdanit. I say it in English, in Hebrew, just not to make it scholarly in general. They used, if you read the Vikuach, the discussion between Remah and Luria, it's unbelievably interesting text. How two people relate to each other, how they relate to symbolic and typological stories from the Bible as based to new understanding of things. There is no way to, there is no more important text than this rude and brutal discussion between those two relatives, the young Remah and the old Luria. The same I say about Torat Haolah. Torat Haolah, many people try to find Kabbalah, like lately somebody that didn't publish any paper about it, but I heard from him, so I prefer not to mention it by name. He uses it as a philosophical text without knowing this very important thing, important by my eyes. I'm not sure that I'm right. You can do it by yourself to decide. But I feel that he speaks in a superficially way about something that is not written in the book, and he miss many things just because he doesn't understand that they don't have another language. They don't have it. There is no subject in the Haskalah, in their own library. They read everything in the same way, at least from the point of view of language, of terms, of abstract terms. So we have to take from the Talmud. The most important thing is the discussion in Remah. Both of them use Ilchot Re'ah, forgot the word. Loneliness. They take something from Ilchot Re'ah to speak about hard things and soft things. They use it symbolically from the Shechita, from Isur Ve'eter we use now. That they know by heart. And they took all the terms there and put it there. And they understand that you can make the jump from the symbolic world to the real one. And by the way, all the people who dealt with this important discussion, first of all, they didn't pay attention that they speak about double letters than they appears in the book. More than double than letters, the correspondence between Remah and Luria has mentioned in the text itself. You were written such and such. If you make a reconstruction of the correspondence, you come to 10 letters. Then you can see that they used to write to each other every week or every 2 weeks. And it's not a vicuah. It's not. They don't argue about the topic. They used to be in touch. That's it. So one beautiful example of how scholars build a relationship between themselves. But we have to read it in their own eyes and not in ours. It's quite difficult. I believe that somebody will hear me in 10 years, he will say that I did the same problem, and he will be right, of course. But from generation to generation, we make the field clearer. That's it. Yes, you do. I apologize. I feel that I'm too tired to build my sentences as it has to be. What?
Relate this to previous discussion. Something that I think I understood implicitly, but I would like to make explicit. When he said at the end that he wants to arrange the this is also a creation of textuality, and also a continuation of the rejection of the the technique and the orality are both rejected for the textuality and the
Repeat, please. I wasn't focused enough. Sorry.
The rejection of people in this text.
Yes. I'm not sure they relate to the people as we spoke about.
So it's not to attach too much significance to this word.
No, absolutely not. He doesn't meant the pilpul that we spoke about. He doesn't say here pilpul is like the modern meaning of the word. To make something not clear, not too sophisticated and not true. That's the meaning of it's not the meaning of the pilpul that we use.
I have more questions, but
okay, so do that. Okay. Good more? Okay, thank you very much.